For 500 years, global power followed a seemingly predictable pattern. Portugal passed the baton to Spain. Spain to Holland. Holland to the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom to the United States. And now everyone expects the US to pass the baton to China. Analysts talk about 500 years, 5 empires evolution, as if it were a natural and inevitable cycle. But what if they've been wrong all along? What if there's no baton to pass? What if the United States broke the 500-year cycle forever? The traditional narrative is seductive because it seems logical. Empires grow, dominate, decline, and are replaced by new empires. It's history repeating itself in predictable cycles. Portugal dominated the seas in the 16th century. Spain controlled gold in the 17th. Holland created the financial system in the 18th. The United Kingdom industrialized the world in the 19th. The United States dominated the 20th century. According to this logic, China should dominate the 21st century. It's next in line. It has a growing economy, a massive population, global ambitions. It seems inevitable that the cycle will continue. But look closer and you'll discover something extraordinary. There was no cycle. There was linear evolution. Each empire was not replaced by the next. It was absorbed by the next. Portugal didn't fall to Spain. It transferred navigation knowledge. Spain didn't collapse to Holland. It evolved an extraction system. Holland didn't lose to the United Kingdom. It developed a financial system. The United Kingdom didn't lose its empire to the US. It strategically transferred hegemony. Each transition was planned evolution, not accidental replacement. And this evolution culminated in the United States, not as a fifth empire destined to fall, but as the final stage of 500 years of global hegemonic development. Here's what makes this revolutionary. The dollar broke the imperial cycle forever. Not because the US is special, but because it reached the point of hegemonic saturation. It combined military, financial, technological, nuclear, and space control on a scale that makes succession impossible. China cannot succeed the US because it is integrated into the American system. Russia tried to challenge and was economically isolated. Europe is an American technological and military vassal. No country can replicate the multidimensional combination of power that the US has accumulated. The question is not which country will dominate the 21st century. The question is, how will the world function under permanent American hegemony? Because for the first time in 500 years there will be no imperial succession. There will only be continuous evolution of the American system. When we re-examine the last 500 years without the lens of the repetitive cycle, we discover something fascinating. Each empire was actually an evolutionary stage towards definitive global control. They were not competitors that replaced each other. They were collaborators that succeeded each other in a planned evolution. Stage 1, Portugal, 1500–1600, discovery of global roots. Portugal did not dominate the world. It discovered how to connect it. It created the first truly global trade routes, mapped oceans, established trading posts on all continents. When Spain took over leadership, it did not conquer Portugal. It inherited Portuguese knowledge. Portuguese navigators worked for Spain. Portuguese maps guided Spanish expeditions. It was a transfer of knowledge, not a conquest. Stage 2, Spain, 1600–1700, continental resource extraction. Spain took Portuguese roots and transformed them into a massive extraction system. American gold and silver financed not only Spain but all of Europe. When Holland surpassed Spain, it did not destroy the Spanish system. It financed it. Dutch bankers lent to Spain. Dutch merchants transported Spanish gold. It was an evolution from extraction to financing. Stage 3, Holland, 1700–1800. Development of the financial system. Holland transformed Spanish gold into a modern financial system. It created central banks, stock markets, marine insurance, international credit. When the United Kingdom took over power, it did not eliminate the Dutch system, it expanded it. Dutch bankers moved to London. The Dutch financial system became the basis of the British system. It was an evolution from local to global financing. Stage 4, United Kingdom, 1800–1950, industrialization and global markets. The United Kingdom took the Dutch financial system and combined it with the Industrial Revolution. It created the first truly global economic system. British factories, colonial raw materials, world markets. When the U.S. inherited hegemony, it did not defeat the United Kingdom. It received a planned transfer. The Bretton Woods Agreement was negotiated between allies, not imposed by victors. Stage 5, U.S. 1950-present. Total hegemony. The United States combined Portuguese global routes, Spanish resources, the Dutch financial system, British industrialization, and added elements that broke the pattern forever: nuclear weapons, digital technology, space control. The genius of this evolution lies in continuity. Each empire preserved and expanded the achievements of the previous one. Portugal discovered routes that Spain used to extract resources that Holland financed, for the United Kingdom to industrialize, for the U.S. to dominate. Globally, there were no falls or collapses. There were strategic transfers between allies who shared a common goal: increasing global control. Each stage was preparation for the next, and the American stage was designed to be final. Evidence of this continuity is in the integration of elites. Banking families that financed Portugal also financed Spain, Holland, the United Kingdom, and the U.S. Rothschild, Warburg, Morgan, they operated in all empires because they were not separate empires. They were stages of the same hegemonic project. The United States is not just the fifth empire in a 500-year sequence. It is the breaking point that shattered the historical pattern forever. 5 fundamental elements changed with American hegemony, making imperial succession impossible for the first time in history. Rupture 1. Nuclear weapons. For the first time in history, hegemonic war became impossible. Portugal, Spain, Holland, and the United Kingdom could be surpassed through military conflict. But nuclear war means mutually assured destruction. China cannot defeat the U.S. militarily because both would be annihilated. Russia learned this during the Cold War. Succession through war, the historical mechanism of imperial change, no longer exists. Rupture 2. Global digital control. The U.S. controls the digital infrastructure that connects the world. Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple. They process data from billions of people globally. Unlike previous empires that controlled physical territories, the U.S. controls the digital territory where all humanity lives daily. It is control over human cognition on a planetary scale. Rupture 3. Irreversible financial system. Bretton Woods created irreversible global financial dependence. 60% of world reserves are in dollars. SWIFT processes transactions in dollars. Commodities are priced in dollars. Unlike previous systems that countries could abandon, the dollar system is the infrastructure of the global economy. Leaving means total economic isolation. Rupture 4. Interconnected globalization. The world economy is so integrated that imperial succession would mean global collapse. Supply chains cross dozens of countries. Technology depends on global components. Finance is instantaneously interconnected. Any attempt to replace the U.S. would destroy a system that benefits all countries. Rupture 5. Three-dimensional control. The U.S. dominates land, sea, air, space, and cyberspace simultaneously. It spends more on defense than the next 10 countries combined. It controls the GPS that guides global navigation. It dominates the satellites that connect worldwide communications. It controls the internet that processes global information. It is multidimensional hegemony without historical precedent. These ruptures explain why China cannot succeed the U.S. as Spain succeeded Portugal. China is integrated into the American system, not competing with it. Chinese companies depend on American technology. Chinese banks use the American financial system. Chinese military avoids nuclear confrontation with the U.S. Russia tried to challenge American hegemony and was quickly isolated. Economic sanctions demonstrated that trying to operate outside the American system means exclusion from the global economy. It's a lesson China observed carefully. Europe, theoretically capable of independence, chose voluntary vassalage. It depends on American military protection, American technology, the American financial system. Brexit showed that even leaving the European Union is easier than leaving the American system. The Great Rupture means that for the first time in 500 years, global hegemony has become permanent. Not because the U.S. is eternal, but because it created a system that makes its replacement impossible without global destruction. The dominant narrative assumes that China will inevitably succeed the United States as the next hegemonic power. Analysts point to Chinese economic growth, massive population, global ambitions. But this analysis ignores a fundamental reality. China is not competing with the American system. It is integrated into it. Why China cannot succeed the U.S. China fundamentally depends on American technology to function. Advanced semiconductors that power the Chinese economy are produced with American equipment. Software that runs Chinese factories is American. Chinese artificial intelligence trains on American chips. When the U.S. cut Huawei's access to American components, the most advanced Chinese company instantly collapsed. More importantly, China is financially integrated into the American system. Chinese reserves are predominantly in dollars. Chinese trade is settled through the American banking system. Chinese companies issue dollar-denominated debt to access global markets. Chinese de-dollarization is political rhetoric, not economic reality. Militarily, China avoids direct confrontation with the U.S. because it knows it would lose. American military spending surpasses Chinese by a massive margin. American military technology is decades ahead. American allies geographically surround China. A Sino-American war would mean the destruction of China, not a Chinese victory. Why Russia failed to challenge the U.S. Russia tried to create an alternative system to the American one, and was quickly isolated. Economic sanctions demonstrated that operating outside the American system means exclusion from the global economy. The ruble collapsed. Russian companies lost access to technology. Russian oligarchs lost global assets. Russian attempts to create alternatives to SWIFT, the American banking system, and American technologies failed because other countries did not join. Even Russian allies like China and India maintain primary integration with the American system. Why Europe chose vassalage. Europe has the resources for independence but chose voluntary dependence. It depends on American military protection through NATO. It depends on American technology for innovation. It depends on the American financial system for global trade. Brexit showed that leaving the European Union is traumatic but possible. But no European country considers leaving the American system because it would mean economic isolation and military vulnerability. The structural impossibility of succession. Unlike historical successions, replacing the U.S. today would mean destroying the infrastructure of modern civilization. The internet, GPS, the global banking system, supply chains, technology, all integrated into the American system. Any country that tried to succeed the U.S. would first have to destroy a system that benefits all countries, including itself. It is economic suicide that no rational leader would consider. More importantly, the U.S. learned historical lessons. Instead of exploiting other countries like previous empires, it created a system that benefits global elites. Chinese, European, and even Russian oligarchs prefer the American system, because that is where their assets are safe and grow. There will be no sixth empire because the American system has made imperial succession unnecessary and impossible. It is hegemony by global consensus, not unilateral imposition. For the first time in 500 years of modern history, we have reached the end of imperial succession. The dollar broke the imperial cycle forever, creating a completely new geopolitical reality, permanent hegemony. The implications of this historical rupture redefine how the global economy, politics, and society will function in the 21st century and beyond. Implication 1. End of hegemonic competition. There will no longer be great games between rival powers fighting for global domination. China, Russia, Europe all operate within the American system, not against it. Competition exists, but it is competition for position within the American hierarchy, not competition for global leadership. This means unprecedented geopolitical stability. World wars happened when rival powers disputed hegemony. Without real hegemonic dispute, global conflicts become unlikely. Regional wars will continue, but hegemonic war, the kind that redefines world order, is no longer possible. Implication 2. Continuous evolution of the American system. Instead of being replaced, the American system will continuously evolve, just as it evolved from a territorial empire to a financial empire to a technological empire. It will continue to evolve into more sophisticated forms of global control. The next evolution will likely involve artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and brain-computer interfaces. The U.S. does not need to maintain hegemony through force. It can maintain it through control over human cognition and decision-making. Implication: irreversible. Global integration countries can no longer leave the global system as they could in the past. Economic autarky is impossible. Technological isolation is suicide. Military independence is an illusion. All countries are permanently integrated into the American system. This creates stability but also vulnerability. Countries that challenge the U.S. can be instantly isolated economically. Companies that do not follow American rules lose access to global markets. It is control through voluntary dependence. Implication 4. Dollar as global infrastructure. The dollar is no longer just an American currency. It is the infrastructure of global civilization. Like electricity or the internet, the dollar has become a global public utility that everyone needs to function. This means that the U.S. can print trillions without traditional inflationary consequences because the world needs trillions in dollars to operate. It is monetary privilege without historical precedent that can last indefinitely. Implication 5. Global governance through corporations. The American government no longer needs to govern the world directly. Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft govern global behavior through algorithms and platforms. It is more efficient governance than any territorial empire ever achieved. For investors and analysts, understanding permanent hegemony offers a crucial strategic advantage. Instead of betting on successors to the U.S., invest in the continuous evolution of the American system. Instead of expecting the dollar's collapse, recognize its transformation into permanent global infrastructure. Sectors that benefit from permanent hegemony: American technology, the American financial system, companies that operate globally through American platforms. Vulnerable sectors: countries and companies that try to operate outside the American system. The new reality: 500 years of imperial succession have ended. Not because history stopped, but because it evolved to a final stage. The American system will not be replaced. It will be continuously updated. It is the Windows of geopolitics. It monopolizes the global operating system. The question is no longer which country will dominate next. The question is, how will the American system evolve next? And the answer will determine the future of humanity for centuries to come. The dollar broke the imperial cycle forever. Welcome to the era of permanent hegemony.